On today's show, Russell Westbrook is set to join Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. Why did Jokic want Russ in Denver, and how is Russ in Denver going to be different than any of the previous pit stops in his career? Plus, how concerning are the depth issues for this Nuggets team? We're going to unpack all that and so much more on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, I love sports. I love them so much. I never really want them to stop, right? But when you got playoffs and stuff winding down, and then you get fewer and fewer games, and the sports maybe aren't sportsing the way you want them to. Look, FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Right now, you can head over to FanDuel.com and take a look at the outright betting favorites to win the title this upcoming NBA season. The Boston Celtics favorites to repeat at plus 300. Then in second place, you got the OKC Thunder at plus 750, and holding down third place, the Denver Nuggets at plus 850, as well as the Philadelphia 76ers. So for all those odds and so much more, head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Nuggets and Locked On NBA, Matt Moore. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcast or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Nuggets. And I know Matt is so incredibly excited about the newest addition to the Denver Nuggets, one Russell Westbrook, set to join Nikola Jokic in the Mile High City. And Matt, I can't help but sit here, and we have to give credit where credit is due. Russ's last stint with the Clippers, I think he embraced a new role. It was a lot better than a lot of his previous pit stops. But I can't help but look at this acquisition by the Nuggets and think, man, it's like the Arrested Development meme, right? Where like it hasn't, it never works. It never worked for these other people, but maybe it'll work for us. And that was my immediate reaction when we found out that the Nuggets were interested in acquiring Russell Westbrook, and now they've got him. So what's your immediate takeaway for this? How do you envision Russ working on this Nuggets roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the feeling in Denver is, everyone will say, like, it didn't work with any of these teams. And the Nuggets will respond with, those teams are not the Nuggets, right? That Nikola Jokic is such a great facilitator and such a great player that makes everyone better, that he'll get the best out of Russ, particularly because you're entering in a situation in which clearly there's a pre-existing relationship that Jokic wanted Russell Westbrook in Denver, and Russ wanted to come to Denver to play with Nikola Jokic, that will open doors that were previously closed. I'll be honest with you. Like, I'm not going to sit here. I will never play Pollyanna for the Denver Nuggets. I'll never do that. I will never play the role of cheerleader. What are the odds that this works? They're low. You know why? Because he hasn't worked for anybody else. And you mentioned it. I thought he was good. It was
funny because as you were doing that sentence, I was like, you could just replace Nikola Jokic's name with LeBron James, and it's the exact same situation for the Lakers. So, like, what? That's why I'm struggling with it.
Yeah, why is it going to be different? I think it's a valid question. Like, I think it's fair to have skepticism about this working. I think the assumption should be that it will be frustrating. I've tried to prepare Denver fans as much as possible. They're like, oh, he brings such athleticism and intensity. I was like, yeah, he also brings terrible shots. Like, so many shots that are just abysmal. The fact that he has recommitted himself on the defensive end like he did with the Clippers needs to provide a little bit of hope. That, like, hey, it's one thing if you are a liability in terms of your ability to hit a jump shot. It's another thing if you're a liability in terms of your ability to hit a jump shot and you're a traffic cone. You can't be that combination. And he has really reconfigured himself to care more about defense at this point in his career, and that's a testament to him. The best way to kind of think about it is that Russ is not trying to replace Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's upgrading over Reggie Jackson, and in an attempt trying to honestly upgrade a little bit closer to what Bruce Brown was for them. Bruce was a better shooter. Russ is more of a true point guard and an overall better athlete, even at this point in his career. And if Russ can just help the bench minutes to be a little bit better, if he can cover for the games where Jamal Murray needs to be out, it's very difficult to lose the minutes with Nikola Jokic. So I'm not worried about those minutes where Russ plays with Jokic. If those are bad, then the Nuggets have a real disaster on their hands because almost nobody has loses their minutes when they're next to Jokic. But if he could just provide a pretty solid low floor to keep it out of, oh man, they got outscored by 15 points in the 8 minutes where Jokic sat. As long as they can avoid that, then this isn't a totally fine move. This isn't a massive move. It's not a move. It will be billed as like, oh, it's a former MVP. Oh, Mr. Triple Double. Ah, Russell Westbrook. He's not that guy anymore. But what he can be is a very solid backup point guard that can help the Nuggets replace some of the production that they've lost, even if you have to look at this offseason and say that they are worse now than they were to start last season.
Now, I think the bigger issue here is acquiring Russ is kind of a symptom of a much, much bigger problem. And there are very serious depth concerns about this Nuggets team. I think you can look at, obviously, back-to-back off seasons, right? Since winning the title, right? They win the title, then you lose two key contributors in Bruce Brown and Jeff Green. Now you're losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, what made your starting five so lethal, arguably, if not the best starting five in the NBA. And obviously they haven't really been able to replace any of those guys. They're kind of banking on and leaning on, second and third year guys to essentially offset these losses. So Russ helps with that, right? If you can kind of keep the scoreboard moving, at least in the non-Jokic minutes, you're in a better position. But as it stands right now, how concerning are the Nuggets' depth issues right now? When you look at the rest of the rotation, that Christian Brown is the projected replacement for KCP in the starting lineup, like that does not inspire a ton of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the concern. And the way to kind of view that is like, look, again, if you have Nikola Jokic, it's very hard to have him not be great in those minutes. Like those starters are probably going to be plus 10 in net rating. They're probably going to have a lead whenever Jokic checks out of the game. And if they're down, they'll probably retake the lead in a lot of games because Jokic is one of those levels of player. And he is playing next to Jamal Murray, who has a lot of incentive to try and, make up for what was an abysmal playoff run that has a lot of people asking questions about him. And then Aaron Gordon is still there. So like you still have pieces of that championship core that are very much in place. I think what you kind of have to look at is, can Christian Brown start at two guard? Yes, he can. Is he going to be as good as KCP? Like that's a big question mark. And there's some that think that he can. And I'm of the mindset that like, no, I'm a little bit worried about it. If they can establish more of a two guard by platoon, where some games it might be Julian Strother, some games it might be Christian Brown, some games it might be Peyton Watson, who looks a little bit more as a wing than a big forward. There's some opportunity there. I actually have a lot of confidence that Peyton Watson's going to be able to make a jump. Julian Strother did what he needed to do in Summer League, which is show that he was too good to be at Summer League. That's always what you want your second year guys to do. So there's a lot of guys that can pop on this roster. I just think that there's also a lot of things where they need a bunch of them to go right at the same time and nothing to go wrong. And that's why it feels like this championship run is maybe more fragile than it's been the last two seasons. The Nuggets need to be in the championship conversation. They just can't be at the forefront of it.
Now, there were some rumors once upon a time about MPJ, his potential future with this Nuggets team. As it stands right now, I mean, are the Nuggets in a position where they should be shopping MPJ? Is there a world where you can turn MPJ into two other quality rotation players? And that's the dilemma that I keep finding when I look at this Nuggets roster, thinking, well, who would want MPJ and who would be willing to send back two pieces for one guy if that one guy is MPJ?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're talking about a 6'10", 42% three-point shooter that has the ability to rebound as well as he does and who has sacrificed as much as he has in his own game to help win a championship, then MPJ looks like this great trade piece. But the reality is he's also a player that's had multiple back surgeries and that isn't a great defensive player and has had a very miserable end to his last postseason. So there's a lot of questions about what they can get. I think at this point, it'd be very hard to be able to get something on the line for MPJ that would be an acceptable reason to trade him. I mean, part of this is even if you can get a solid assortment of role players to try and fill the gap in for MPJ, it's going to be hard to convince the Nuggets that that's not better than what he is now because he did help them win a title. So that's what's really tricky about this. Their best path to filling in depth to making a more complete team might be trading MPJ, but it takes away from the possibility of what has made them elite and won them a title a year ago. And that's what he brings to the table as a spacer and with all that athleticism. So it's a tricky situation I think the Nuggets are in. And I think that if they get to a point where they have to make a deal, it's going to be more of a sign of desperation than it's going to be an opportunity.
What will Russell Westbrook look like playing alongside Nikola Jokic? Will the Nuggets make any more moves ahead of the regular season? You're gonna have us covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Nuggets. Matt, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks for having me.